Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Her Drive podcast. I'm your host, Cynthia. And this week we have another wonderful guest who is going to illuminate not only her story, but also share information about her coaching process and all that focuses on, such as mindset, weight loss, fitness. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Tateossian. Hello, Terry. Welcome to Her Drive.
Thank you, Cynthia. You did a great job with my name. I can't pronounce my own last name sometimes either. So
Does that depend on the amount of tequilas you've had? Well,
I am very excited to be here. So thank you.
yeah, it's my pleasure as well. Well, I know you're a coach, and when we were kind of diving into that, it's basically everything is very much interconnected. So let's just dive in. Like, what's your focus, and who do you predominantly work with?
Yes. So the focus really is women that have reached a point, and sometimes men as well, that have reached a point where they have tried everything, just like I had at one point, and nothing really worked in a sustainable, consistent way. So a lot of us go through this period of time where we try dozens of different diets, and we always end up either weighing or gaining more weight at the end of the diet and not really knowing where to start or what the most optimal and effective ways are to lose weight, stay fit, to continue the journey throughout the years moving forward, and not just yo yo up and down consistently. So that is generally my focus.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a pretty extreme place to focus because I think that so many of us struggle with that no matter what our age is, right? And it seems as though when we get older, certain things just slow down. And I don't know if, if there's a programming in us that we think that we have to slow down, or we can just rest a little easier, eat a little bit more, and it's just accepted to kind of lose that mobility, that strength, that fitness, and that wellness. And I'm curious about what your thoughts are on that as far as aging and the mindset around wellness.
My perspective generally focuses around the fact that in our 40s and 50s, we start to experience some changes in hormonal fluctuations. So I make everything a lot of fun and joke around a lot. It's not necessarily funny, but it's better to look at it with the funny lens. And so I call it our second coming of adolescence, right? And so we start to experience hormonal shifts. Things are in fluctuation. We may not be feeling that great. Our mood swings might be a little bit more extreme, just the same way as they were when we were entering our adolescence years. However, the thing that does not change along with the hormonal fluctuation is our behavior and our habits. And so we truck on and continue to do the same things that we've always done, thinking that they're going to work, right? But our body is different in our 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. Our lifestyle is different. We have different responsibilities. And the things that used to work in our 20s and 30s no longer work. And so we kind of give up thinking that that's the way we are now. That's just the process of aging, right? Quote unquote. And that we get stuck essentially.
That makes perfect sense, especially with the continuing on the same habits that we could do when we had a different set of hormones and I don't know. I'm thinking now about the people with the French fries, right? Like maybe you can't eat the French fries like you used to. So I'm curious. You had your own journey of weight loss, and I would love to dive into that a little bit. Like, where were you at within your own personal journey, and what kind of spurred that, and how did you take such like heavy measure for such drastic results?
At 37, I found myself very much overweight. As a matter of fact, I would call it obese. And I started experiencing all kinds of symptoms that were going to lead me into a very negative place. I ended up being hospitalized twice. I had pre-diabetic markers. I had ovarian cysts. I had extreme fatigue. Who knows what else was lurking around that I don't even know about. But generally, I just did not feel well. And I began the process of trying to figure out why every time I went on a diet, I ended up gaining more weight instead of losing. I always lost weight, but I always gained more weight than I lost. And this cycle kept repeating itself for quite a while. I was always on a diet. I was always on extreme restriction, followed by the inevitable binge. I had a very busy life. I had multiple businesses, kids, family, friends, all the things. And I could not understand how, for someone that was fairly intelligent, fairly hardworking, I gave it all I had, I could not for the life of me figure out my own body. That was my Achilles heel. And no matter how successful I was in all other endeavors and all kinds of ventures and all kinds of things, I kept failing over and over and over again in my own body. And so I started this quest, and eventually, through many trials and errors and many failed attempts and many instances of self-sabotaging behavior, I discovered that I did have an emotional issue that was preventing me from going all the way with my health and my wellness and my fitness and my weight stability. And so I kind of dived into that aspect of it. I did realize I had an emotional eating problem. I would be on a severe restriction for quite a while and then have a massive binging episode when things would kind of get wavy in my personal life. And that was a continuous cycle that kept repeating itself. And it was a process. In total, I would say it took about 10 years. I'm still going through it. It was a process of a lot of hard work to unpack all of that and to create new habits, new behaviors, new beliefs, and to override outdated programming that I was running with in my own identity.
Yeah, that sounds really like a powerful journey of discovering what was happening. And I love that you use the word programming. Yeah, like that is something that is almost like our computer code in our brain, but just like a computer, you can reprogram it. So, for those who might be curious about what that programming looks like in a more profound way, like how could someone tell if they have like an emotional eating habit or something like that that is being caused by a triggering event in their personal work, etc., like outside of, it's not related to food, but they're using food as a way to comfort or have control in some way?
The first step that I would say is a critical step is curiosity. Curiosity about why potentially maybe you are not able to do certain things that you want in your life. This applies to everything. This applies to your health, to your fitness, to your family, to your relationships, to your financial status, to your career. Really, it applies across the board to everything. So let's say, for example, somewhere inside of you, you want to achieve this certain thing. You want to feel a certain way. You want to look a certain way. You want to have a certain career, have a certain partner. Doesn't matter. And for whatever reason, you are just not able to get to that place. And so the first step is, instead of quitting, instead of giving up, instead of saying, oh, it's not meant for me, or I'm not supposed to do these things, or it's never going to happen, or it's too big of a goal, get curious about it and say, so obviously there are other people who have been able to achieve this thing that I'm looking for. You can go out there and find those people. and look for evidence that this is possible. Other people are doing it. So, step one, get curious. How are other people able to achieve it? What are those people doing that I'm not doing? Or maybe I don't know to do, or maybe I don't have the right tool, or maybe I don't have the right mindset, or whatever it may be. How can I get those skills? Because essentially it's a skill, right? How can I get those skills? How can I learn those skills in order to move myself forward? So, step one, get curious. Step two, become aware of some of the hidden obstacles that you're self generating. And they could be in the form of thoughts, they can be in the form of outdated beliefs, they could be in the form of specific behaviors that you're exhibiting that maybe you're not even aware of until you start to pay attention to what you're doing that may be creating an obstacle you can't overcome in your own mind, right? Because it's all self generated at the end of the day. And once you go through curiosity, go through self awareness, take action, right? If you do the first two, but you take no action, you're still in the same place. So take action by having a logistical, practical plan and strategy on how you can maybe overcome some of those barriers, how you can take action and take steps forward. Even if they're small in the beginning, they add up at the end of the year, or 5 years or 10 years, like in my case. They add up to really big shifts, not only in where you're at personally, but how you also feel about yourself. So those would be my three easy 3 steps, right? Easy, not so easy, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the harder things is self-reflection and deep observation and tracking our thoughts. And maybe even beyond tracking the thoughts, like even first acknowledging these negative thoughts and patterns that show up, right? So yes, easily said, harder to implement. But I think once we do start to execute these processes, it becomes easier and easier to engage and shift and make some change, starting with the awareness. And I'm curious what your thoughts are in regards to all the conflicting information out there in the wellness space. How does one delineate between what's accurate for them, their body type, their age, their experience, their gender, and then dismiss the rest?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's exactly the loop that I was in for my entire life. So the loop was, oh, new shiny object in the form of this miracle diet. Let's get on that. We're going to drink celery juice for 6 months. We're going to go totally vegan for 6 months because that's how we're going to lose weight. We're going to go fruitarian. We're going to lose weight. That's what all the celebrities are doing. Oh, you know that shot everybody's taking, or that pill, or that whatever thing, or that surgery? All the celebrities are doing it. It's all over the news. That's it. That's got to be it, right? So
Yeah.
we jump around from thing to thing, thinking that it's the fast solution. It's going to give us results right away because all these celebrities are doing it. It must be okay. Well, none of those things worked for me. So I always found myself right back to square one, still clueless, right? So every time I did one of those celery juice diets, only eat vegan, and I just oscillated between extremes, right? Eat keto, be on keto, all you eat is animal protein, and then boom, I'd go vegan. And nothing ever worked. Why? Because they're all gimmicks. They're not sustainable. Anything that sounds too good to be true most likely is going to be too good to be true. There are definitive staples to fitness and wellness that have been published over and over and over again. There are many studies that have been done on the benefits of resistance training, no matter what your age or gender or where you're at in terms of fitness level. That is beneficial. There are many, many studies that are out there that you can look up on nutrition and how to eat in a way that fuels your body without going into malnutrition, right? So something that I discovered recently actually is that most of the diets that I did, I was in a caloric deficit, but I was also malnutritioned because I was missing huge food groups. And so my body is very intelligent. Your body is very intelligent. It knows what it needs in order to survive. So when you spend a lot of time in a malnutrition state, your body's going to find a way to get those calories in. So the key is really to be in a caloric deficit, which is how you achieve fat loss specifically, but avoid malnutrition by having a balanced meal, having it frequently, staying within a caloric deficit for your body and your activity level. So those are things that really make a lot of logical sense, but our brains are rejecting these ideas because it seems too overwhelming and too difficult. And so what I did finally when I raised the white flag and I said, I can't figure this out. I had to put my ego down and say, okay, you're smart, but you're obviously not that smart. That, you can't figure this out by yourself. You need to ask for help. And that's what I did. I asked for help. I got a coach and things were laid out perfectly for me, what I needed to do, how much I needed to eat, what type of food I should have been eating the whole time, what type of exercise to do. It wasn't all cardio, which is what a lot of us do, right? It was a lot of resistance training with a little bit of cardio. And so, of course, it depends on the goal and the person and where they're at. It's very bio-individual, but there are basic principles that we can follow that are not fads. They've been around forever.
Mm. I think that's also beautifully stated. And I'm curious about your thoughts for those who've spent so much time being in a caloric deficit. Like, I've heard a lot of people have had success actually eating a lot more food so that the body can balance out and understand that it's no longer in starvation. It doesn't have to store and store and store. What are your thoughts on that process of like going up in calories and then slowly bringing them back down a little bit?
100% agree with you. So, personal story that's actually, I see it reflected in clients that I work with right now. And I'll use myself as the example because I experienced it. So when I started this lifestyle, I was supposedly what I thought was what most of the time, right, except for the binging days, I was in a caloric deficit. So generally, when I tracked my calories, I was eating about 900 calories per day, which right now, if I were 900 calories per day, I would be extremely hungry.
Yeah.
And a lot of women, when I talk to them, they boast about how they are not hungry ever. They're only eating 850 calories a day. They're tracking meticulously and they're never hungry. And they think that that's a great thing. And the first thing that I say is, well, that's actually something that we need to remedy. We need to fix that because we want to be hungry physically. We want to feel that we require more food and more nutrition. The fact that you're not hungry, in my opinion, is your body's dying, essentially, right? Your body is shut down. It's starving. It's not hungry because you're not fueling yourself the right foods. And it's not a good thing. It's not going to promote weight loss or fat loss specifically. It's actually promoting autophagy. And that is the body consuming itself, consuming muscle tissue, consuming whatever it can find in order to survive. And so the goal is to bring up the calories as high as possible, to go into a reverse diet, essentially, to rev up the metabolism, to fuel, because your metabolism, if you think about it, is like a fire, right? When you don't put any wood into it, it dies out. So our goal is to slowly bring the fire back up, to rev up the engine, and then slowly begin to go into a caloric deficit if that's even necessary, because a lot of times you don't even need to do that.
I love that you mentioned that our metabolism is like a fire. And I've studied Ayurveda, so wellness from like an ancient Indian philosophy, and they call our digestion like Agni, which means fire. And we need that fuel. And so I just love that you touched on it. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on different types of foods. Are there primary foods that we should be consuming that are going to better boost our digestive fire and our nutrition levels, or how do you categorize them?
So it's funny that you mentioned that. So when I was getting my certification in emotional eating, the institute that I was studying with classified primary foods as something other than what I thought it was. So primary foods is actually emotional satisfaction, emotional nutrition, joy, happiness, intimacy, purpose, fulfillment. And those are the foods that we consume as primary foods. The physical foods that we consume are the macro and the micronutrients, right? So protein, carbs, fat, fiber, and all the micronutrients like magnesium, potassium, etc., sodium. So I found that to be really, really interesting, because not only are we physically starved, we're also emotionally starved. And a lot of times the emotional starvation creates more havoc than the physical starvation, from what I have observed in myself and in clients. But generally, as far as the actual physical food, the primary nutrient that we like to focus on is protein, eating at least your body weight in protein per day, 1 to 1.2 grams of protein per desired body weight. And then the rest is split up into carbs and fat. Obviously, paying attention to fiber is really important as well as we get into our 40s. But some of the other nutrients I like to look at is their magnesium, potassium, sodium, and generally trying to keep those in line as well, as far as each individual is concerned, because everybody, again, is very different.
Wow, thank you for sharing all of that with me. And I find it interesting that your studies brought you into that place of identifying emotions, like positive emotions and connection, as something that we ingest. So, for those of us who are really lacking in that type of connection, what do you suggest that we do? Because I feel like we live in this society more and more where we're separating from others and becoming more isolated. So it's harder and harder to gain that emotional connection with others. And obviously, we all struggle, I think, sometimes with some veins of that within ourselves.
Yeah, so something else that I've noticed is that food addiction for me, just like all other addictions, and I've spoken to a few experts on this topic, and they are all confirming the same experience that they've had. Like, for example, Dr. Rob Kelly, who's actually located in your state in San Antonio. He is an alcohol addiction expert. I interviewed him on my podcast last month. And he and I, it's so funny because his perspective is coming from alcohol, right? Alcohol treatment. And my personal experience and my observations are coming from food addiction specifically. The crux of both of those things is lack of connection. It is a lack of having meaningful connections with other people, with our environment, with our work, with our um, purpose, essentially. And when we reach for the food or the alcohol or the drugs or whatever other behavior, because all self sabotaging behaviors are somewhat of an addiction, we really, what we're doing is we're trying to fill a hole in our emotional state. We're trying to change our emotional state from feeling whatever it's feeling, right? Lonely, bored, not accepted, invalidated, etc. And we're using food, alcohol, whatever it may be, to not feel the disconnection essentially that we're experiencing, because the scariest thing for a human being is to feel disconnected.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely see the connection between all these different addictive patterns and the whole within. So what do you tell your clients? Like how do they find that fulfillment within first?
Well, everybody's different and everybody has a different path. So there's really no one size fits all type of remedy to it. However, the first step is getting curious, right? So why do I grab the jar of Nutella every night and polish it off? Why do I drink a bottle of vodka every couple of days? Why do I need that? What am I trying to achieve with that? Because it has to be something there. There's a reason why the behavior is happening. And so just getting curious about it, despite the fact that it might feel uncomfortable, despite the fact that it might bring up uncomfortable or unpleasant memories, feelings, thoughts, just get curious about it. Ask a lot of questions to yourself and find a way to zero in on those things that are being triggered inside of you. So, what do you feel right before you open that bottle? What are you looking for, really? And is there another way to achieve the same result, the same feeling, the same relief, right? Because we're looking for relief with some other behavior, some other way.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense to me. It seems like my own behaviors. I'm feeling like sad or disconnected, to come back to the point you made earlier. And what I'm seeking is something that's going to increase my dopamine, right? That's why we like reach for the phone and like scrolling or whatever. Or like you said, Nutella. I remember being in my early 20s and I was married and I wasn't happy. And I'd gone to be with him in Japan where he had moved to for work. So I was visiting and I was supposed to be moving there. And it was just this whole chaotic state that I was in internally. And you mentioned the Nutella. And I literally at night would just go and get Nutella and open it and just eat it by the spoonful. And within a matter of weeks, I had gained so much weight. And I know I was eating emotionally. And that was kind of the beginning of a weird pattern that I'd never displayed before. And then not too long after that, I was able to disconnect from that behavior and go back into a healthier lifestyle. But it was absolutely me seeking like comfort, connection, like, and I've also heard this analogy, and I'm curious about your thoughts on that too. Like when we're not feeling safe within or feeling loved, we add more layering, more weight to our bodies to add protection and like a safer boundary. What are your thoughts about that?
I've heard that. I have heard that. I just can't necessarily speak on it. I've never really experienced it. I don't think that's what I was doing, but I have heard that as a coping behavior for individuals that may have been potentially sexually abused or physically abused or had that type of an experience. So I can see that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Well, switching gears just a little bit, how do women who are in like perimenopause or menopause approach their wellness as compared to someone who's not within that stage of life?
So, what I have observed is that we do need a lot more space. We need more room to be able to process. And because perimenopause, in my opinion, comes a lot earlier than most of us are led to believe, I think most of us, we've been told that, perimenopause begins in your 50s, and then you're technically most likely going to be in menopause in your 60s. And so a lot of times that's not true. That's not necessarily the case for everybody. And a lot of women are experiencing perimenopause in their early 40s to mid 40s. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So if you're in your 40s and you're having some interesting things happening that were not happening before, they can potentially be perimenopause. So that's one. Two, in our 40s, mid 40s, 50s, etc., we're extremely overwhelmed, right? So we have more responsibilities at work, we have children. Some of us, we have aging parents. Some of us, we have to take care of them, of our children, our parents, etc. And so that adds a lot more overwhelm to our schedules. On top of that, our hormones are shifting, changing, things are happening that were not happening before. So we're continuing to do the same things that we used to do when we were in our 30s, expecting our bodies and our minds and our emotional state to respond in the same way, but we're not in the same place. And so what I've observed is that we need more time, we need more space, we need more downtime. We need to spend a little bit more time really paying attention to our own health and well-being. We need to have a little bit of a dedicated time to go to the gym, to take a walk, to prepare or prep in advance, maybe some better meals for ourselves that are more in line with whatever our bodies are responding to best. And so that's a severe bottleneck for a lot of us, right? Because we just don't have that time. And the more we keep going, the worse we feel, the more overwhelmed we feel, the less time we feel we have. So the earlier we step into this lifestyle, the better off we're going to be in the long term.
That makes perfect sense. And are there ways that you have found that are best practices to like de-stress, detoxify our lifestyle or just our bodies that are super beneficial?
Strength train in a strategic way. Ask a coach for a program that's going to give you quicker results than if you were just doing random exercises that you just came up with and jumping from machine to machine in the gym with no real plan or strategy. That's one. So optimize your time in the gym. Walk, go outside in nature, breathe, do yoga once or twice a week. Track your sleep. How are you sleeping? Because if you're not sleeping well, the entire next day goes down the drain, right? You have no
Mm.
energy, you're not in a good mood, and your hunger and your appetite is not going to be easily satisfied with healthy food. You're going to want very carby, starchy type of foods to get more energy since you didn't sleep the night before.
Hmm.
So, drink water, right? Make sure you're well
Hmm.
hydrated. So these are all really basic things that sound obvious, but a lot of us are not necessarily paying attention because we're so busy and overwhelmed. But overall, those
Yes.
would be my top things to try and focus on. And then the rest all takes care of itself.
Mm. Yeah, I love that you mentioned sleep. That's so important for our adrenal systems, right? Like, especially the liver really needs us to not eat a certain amount of hours before going to bed so that it can do all the other tasks that is needed to process. And obviously, our chemical processes happening while we're sleeping is so critical. And I didn't really pay much attention to that until like the last year. And going to bed and being asleep by 10 is life changing. Like so vital. So I love that you touched on that. Well, Terry, I have one more question for you. And that is my favorite question I ask everybody, which is if you could go back in time and give a younger Terry some advice, what age would you go back to and what would you say?
Oh my. Oh, that's a good one. I would go back to when I was 24. I'm almost 48. So 50% back. And I would tell myself that everything's going to be fine. You're going to be fine. All the things are going to work out. Just keep your head on straight. That's it. Don't worry about it. Don't sweat it. Do the best that you can because everything's going to be fine. Because now I'm twice your age. I time traveled back to talk to you. And even when you're struggling, there's a silver lining in all of it. Even when you think that you're never going to get out of this mess. I was in a lot of
messes. Yeah, I think it comes with the territory of being younger.
Yeah, everything's going to work itself out because you're not going to quit.
Wow. That's really powerful and beautiful. And I think a lot of us can relate to that message. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And Terry, I open up the floor for you to share any other topics, information that you would like before we let everyone know where to find you.
Absolutely. I love talking about these topics. Thank you for having me. It's become my passion and my purpose in life. And I'll tell you what, once you find that thing that you just can't shut up about, like you just want to talk about it everywhere, you live it, you breathe it, you get excited by it, you seek it out, you research it, you can't sleep because you think about it constantly. When you find that thing, all your addictions go away. You do not feel emotionally starved. You feel fulfilled. You feel you have a purpose in this life. You have a gift to give others and everything falls into line. So if something feels like you are facing a lot of resistance with, if you feel that maybe that's not the right area for you, if you feel that you need to make a change because you're dying inside, right? Listen to that voice. It is possible. You can do it. You can change. You can shift things around no matter how dire they feel like today. They can get better. You just cannot quit on yourself.
So beautiful. Thank you for sharing that pearl of wisdom. Well, Terry, what's the name of your podcast and where can everyone find you outside of that?
I love hearing from everybody. So the podcast name is How Good Can It Get? My Instagram channel is How Good Can It Get? And you can get in touch with me on thehouseofrose.com. That is the company I started after I quit everything and turned everything around, changed my career, changed everything. And it's a women's retreat in the Tennessee mountains. And it's all about, we talk about all this stuff for a couple of days. And then women go home, they take all this stuff home, that this energy, the passion, the belief that it doesn't have to be so hard. It can be much easier. And pass it off. They pass it off to their friends, to their family. And yeah, we're all here to change the world one person at a time.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. And to me, there's this thing I heard earlier today that came in, joy spreads, and I think wellness spreads, healthy choices spreads when people see you lighting up and illuminating from the outside in. It inspires them to say, wow, if this person can do that, so can I. And I absolutely love what you're doing, Terry, and how you are guiding so many of us into a much more equal and loving space with ourselves and a healthier state within our bodies. That's so beautiful.
Thank you, Cynthia, and same to you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Well, take care, and we look forward to witnessing what all unfolds for you.